Hey y'all, just wanted to introduce project number two's wireframes and recap a little bit about some of the ones that worked really well from project one, and then also go over this assignment also. And so let's just start by diving into some of the ones I thought were exceptionally well from last project. So this is the skate zone by Cassidy. And so some of the things that I think are really working well as an example of kind of a good example of last project's work is it's a full page view. In this work by Cassidy, I can see, the primary navigation from the logo in the header all the way down to the footer where you see, business name, address, phone number. And so that's something I think a lot of folks can keep in mind as we move into project two, is to make sure that your work encapsulates the entirety of the page from header or the top navigation all the way down to the footer. I think that threw some people off last project where we talked about the fold line. That fold line doesn't mean that's where your page stops. It just means that that's where the bottom of your anticipated screen size or laptop screen, that's where the fold is going to be. That's where the content from the initial first view would end, but that your page, obviously, if you go out and experience any website, scrolls beyond that. And so I love in this example how Cassidy illustrated where the fold line is, but then also made sure that she showed her work from the header navigation area all the way down to the bottom of her site in the footer. And that's especially important as you think about giving this to a client or to a business partner to review. They don't want to see that you stop short of the work and that you actually included the entirety of the site in your wireframes. And so I think this is a great example of that, and we'll have a few more also of that as well. I really love the layout here, and so by looking at this example, I can see where photos are going to be placed at. And usually photos in wireframes are represented by this X. You might see something that says FPO, or is the old school term for position only, which is just showing where this image might be. And with that, I can just see, the purpose of the wireframes is to get an understanding of the layout and the structure and kind of visually how you intend each portion of the page to lay out. And so I think that Cassidy does a great job here of showing the layout itself, where the taglines are going to be, where the photos are, and the complementary text for that as well. Also love the detail. And so, we talked a little bit about the different ways you can annotate your work. And so I think, for points 3 and 4 here, Cassidy does a great job of showing just enough detail in her wireframes for you to understand structurally how this site is going to lay out, and then complements that with some very detailed annotations, just enough for the audience or for the person you're working with on this project to understand what this looks like, what's going to be there as a part of this final site, but not enough, not too much, so that you're not spending too much time getting into the details. Wireframes are not supposed to be about the visual kind of UI look and feel. We don't want to get bogged down with, what's the color of this button going to be on these wireframes. And so this does a good job, I think, of balancing just enough detail with some great annotations as well. And like I said, we talked about different ways you can annotate. You could do it this way, which is kind of pointing to the different spots on the page, or in this instance where you're kind of like highlighting and bracketing off the entirety of the headline versus kind of these arrows. I think this is a really well done example of how to pull off this approach to wireframing and annotations. When you're annotating like this, you want to make sure that your annotations don't fall on top of the content of the page. And so if you're going to use this arrow kind of format, you wouldn't want to have photo gallery appearing on this page itself, right? You don't want to distract from the wireframe. And here I think we have a good balance of, even to this extent of that the wireframes are in all black and gray, but the annotations, some of the detail and the notes are in blue. And I think that subtlety in the color selection on how she did this helps give clarity and not distract from the actual wireframe itself. So great job on this one. I think it's a great example of how you can annotate in this way, and also the use of the grid paper also. Let's jump into another example. So this is Preston Toyota of Boardman. This is Timothy's wireframe here. What I really loved about this example was the interactive highlights, the interactive callouts here. A few of y'all did that, and I think this is, you can tell it's just a very quick kind of highlighter approach to the interactive callouts, but it gives your audience, it gives a developer perhaps or a business partner a sense of not only what the content of the page is going to be, but then also the moments of interaction, the moments of CTAs or buttons that the user can click on. And so I think this is a really great illustration, great way to showcase those interactive links. That's, again, not too overwhelming. These buttons ultimately aren't going to be green themselves, but we're just highlighting where those interactions and calls to actions or buttons might be. Also like that there's a really clear navigation. And so in this example of Preston Toyota of Boardman, the navigation here at the top is very clear. It includes two types of navs, which I'm going to get into in the second video in this module when we break down the anatomy of a website. But we have this pre-nav here in option number 1 that you see in the annotations. There's a thin bar with phone numbers and current hours. And so a lot of times you'll see that on sites. You have the main primary nav, which would be his number 2 here. And number 1 is just what we call pre-nav. It kind of is above that navigation. It's usually like half the size or smaller of the primary nav. And it's just some of that extra helpful information. And so in this case, it's a phone number and current business hours. And then in number 2, you see a very traditional, Timothy calls it the menu bar or the navigation with the logo, options like new, use, special, about, etc. So the navigation elements within that number 2 section of the primary navigation. That's a very traditional way to lay out the nav. And I think as far as not complicating a site too much and not wanting to have the users have to think too much about how do I even interact with the site, I think this type of navigation is the perfect approach for that. And again, we're going to go over navs in the second video of this module also. But I think just a great example of a clear navigation that, again, provides enough detail for the audience to see, okay, I can see the logo is going to be on the left and my navigation items are going to be on the right, and then supplementing that with the actual annotations there on the right-hand side. Also, number 3, a creative layout. What I really loved about this, and ultimately in the UI design itself also, was that this was a different approach to a car dealership's website. Typically when you go to a car dealership's website, there's a big banner at the top and it's constantly sliding in and out with graphics to get you to want to buy a car. And here I think the designer took an approach of, what if somebody just wants to come in and explore the cars that they like and don't want to just jump into being constantly marketed to? And so I really liked how in section number 5 here, we can't see it here in this screenshot, but these are actually going to be like little miniature cars, images of cars that Toyota offers that the user can just quickly tap on. It would maybe switch out the content here to showcase a Camry or a Corolla or a Highlander maybe, and have the details there. So as a user, I would be intrigued because I probably already know what kind of car or model I'm probably interested in when I come to this site, and I can really easily jump right into that from that site. So I know some of y'all receive feedback about pushing your layout, making it a little bit more creative. I think this is a great example of that, leveraging the grid itself and providing kind of a unique or creative layout that works. It's not too over the top, so the user doesn't have to relearn how to use your website, but is just different enough to provide a new approach to how you might lay out this site. And of course, we talked about annotations. I think these are a great job, again, of giving just enough information here. Timothy took a different route than Cassidy did, and I think both are great examples of different ways you can lay out and do annotations here also. All right, we got one more here. So this is Justin's pressed coffee wireframes here. A couple things that I really like about this, and Justin submitted this on his resubmission. I think there was a great new approach to wireframes for this. One thing you can't see at the very top of this though, but you can see the footer here at the very bottom, number 8, is Justin's detail in his wireframes go from navigation to footer again. Excuse me. And so again, just to reiterate, your wireframes for this project will need to include everything from the top navigation to the footer, down past the fold, everything the user would expect to see on this apartment website. I really like the detailed annotations. I think something that Justin did kind of creatively that I didn't really see on any other, maybe a few other projects or a few other wireframes was just the way he kind of annotated with different colors here. And so that could get a little wild and a little complex, but I think he had just enough to balance that here. But I really liked how it was easy for me to kind of hone in on where's number 4 and here's how number 5 is represented. Maybe a little difficult to read in some spots, but that just, I think of these as little sticky notes or little kind of circular dots on the wireframes, and my eye can easily translate over to where the annotations are for that. Again, very detailed annotations here, even showing, you can kind of see here the About Us text, headline and body. This is the headline font. This is the body copy here in number 5, and I think it's going to extra lengths of detail here in this example. Also really like the structure of this, and so I think this is done maybe on an iPad or in Illustrator. Again, it's hand drawn. It looks very rough, but just enough information, just enough structure and visual layout for me to get an understanding of, okay, I'm going to see the about here, and then I'm going to see the philosophy. I've got this large intro video perhaps, and I've got some left and right arrows to scroll or to experience that also. So I think this is just another example of some great structure to the site. Also using the grid, using very expected layout as the user goes down the page. And also there's one other thing I think Justin did that was really cool, was showing the gestures and the interaction. So I think this was a mobile example, and although we're not going to focus on mobile for this project, it's mainly we're only focusing on desktop because of how in depth this project is going to go. It'll be important in project number 4 as we get into designing an app. What are your anticipated gestures or your actions? Swipe left and right, swipe up and down. Is it a tap? A tap and drag. Those types of interactions. And I think Justin did a great job here, as you see here with just kind of how the finger kind of shows that swipe action. I think this is the mobile view again. And he did this in other areas as well. And so while we're not going to focus on mobile, like I said, for project number 2, I think it's just a really cool thing to keep in mind to explain the interactions, to explain what to expect. Again, that's important for you as the designer to keep this in mind as you go into your visual prototypes. It's important for developers to know that ahead of time, what your anticipated design intent is, but then also for your business partners or the owner of this site to know, as you're talking with them, well, maybe I don't want to have it swipe left and right. Maybe I actually just want to have it stack on top of each other. And so those types of little extra things just help create a dialogue, help give insight and guidance into what your intent is as the designer. So those were 3 examples, and I just wanted to highlight some things that were working well on their wireframes. Hopefully it helps for you to have some inspiration to see what other folks maybe outside of your group have done here within the past project 1 example of the wireframes. Let me just also say that remember, how you present your work really matters. And so it matters for yourself as a portfolio and showing this as the entirety of your work for this assignment. It also is important if you're actually going to be in front of a business partner, or you're doing this as a freelance perspective. You wouldn't want to just send somebody over, really, not high quality photos from your phone. You'd want to, make sure you take the time to either scan it or take a really great quality picture of your phone where it's free of distraction or clutter around it. And so I think in each of these examples here, you see that they zoomed in, just to their sketchbook, just to their paper, and took those photos of their wireframes, and then presented it in a way from that PDF that could be really easy to shoot over to a potential client or colleague to get some feedback on. And so just want to encourage y'all, if you didn't get a chance to in the last project or didn't focus on it, is to take this extra step as you submit your first draft here on Thursday night, as you resubmit your work in your final next Tuesday, is to put it in a format that is professional, that is clean, that is just focusing on the wireframes and not kind of some of the distractions that might be behind the photo. So there's different ways you can do that. You can get closer to it with your camera. You can scan it, just your paper. You can also just crop it in a little tighter as well. And so I think these are 4 examples of folks who did a good job at that here in project number 1's wireframes. All right, let's go over the instructions for this assignment. So for this project, we're only focusing on the desktop design. I want you to think about the different types of layouts and the structures that would be useful based on your selected audience. Of course, everybody selected a different audience type for this apartment complex, and what the style or the vibe of that apartment complex might require as far as layout. Again, if you're designing kind of a high-rise apartment complex in the city, well, that might allow you to have a little bit more modern approach. But if you're designing for maybe a more family-friendly atmosphere for families in the suburbs, well, then maybe your approach is a little bit more traditional. And so in this project, we're trying to meet your audience where they're at with the type of things you've already selected and identified for your apartments. And so based on your selections, I'd encourage you to push the envelope or to keep it a little bit more traditional based off of that. But again, we're looking for the different types of layout and structure for your site. Challenge yourself to think creatively, leveraging what you know about now balancing photography and typographic hierarchy with the grid layout, the things that we've learned along the way. You're going to be submitting your final wireframes that look polished and professional, packaged together like we just talked about in those highlighted examples. And remember, like I said, these are going to be great portfolio pieces to showcase the breadth of your work, to show it as a case study. Myself as a hiring manager, those would be the types of deliverables that I would want to see for somebody that I'm interviewing for a UI UX position, that clean, polished, professional looking piece. And so that's what we're striving for in this class. A couple of things around the requirements. So we're submitting a PDF again. The number of pages is going to be probably different, but it should match the number of pages you identified and cover everything that you're submitting as far as your IA map goes. And so some folks might have, plus or minus 1 or 2 pages based off what they've selected. Make sure you're including all the required content that's needed. So, about the apartment complex, the different photo galleries, the different floor plans, and so on. Those are all highlighted for you. The name of the guidelines should be similar to what we've done in the past. And then your UI dimensions. We're sticking with the 1366 pixels wide. Your breakpoint or your fold line is 768 pixels tall. And again, your content is going to go well below, I can guarantee you, the 768 pixel tall mark. Make sure you include from navigation or header to footer. And again, we're only focusing on desktop only because after wireframes, we're going to be going into actually making a clickable prototype using using InVision, the InVision app software. So if you haven't yet, make sure you get yourself a free account on InVisionApp.com. That's what we're going to be using to port our comps, our visuals into that and create clickable prototypes in the next milestone, or 2 milestones from now as we submit the final prototype. All right, a couple of things around the timestamp. So post number 1 due Thursday evening at 11:59 p.m. Make sure you share your PDF with your group. Things we've done before, include all the pages you identified from your IA map and all the necessary content. And it should include all the annotations like we've just talked about, similar to project number 1. Submit your wireframes in a readable format that's presentable, that's professional, along with 200 to 300 words explaining the thinking behind the wireframes for your design. Post number 2 is going to be due Sunday night, 11:59 p.m. Again, it's a second post, and so this is a 10-point total assignment. 5 dedicated to your work on the wireframes, and then 5 dedicated to the type of feedback that you give to your group. So you need to make sure you provide great feedback to your group, 200 word or so evaluation, some good feedback for them on what's working well, what are some areas they might want to improve on. And again, you need to do that for each member of your group. Make sure in both instances that you get that in as the at the timeline. So again, Thursday, February 25th at 11:59 p.m. Post number 1 due. Post number 2 due on Sunday, February 28th at 11:59 p.m. Make sure your work is submitted and it is all edited ahead of time. Anything that's submitted or edited after the deadline is going to result in a 0. Again, it's just I can't know what's been edited afterwards, and so you need to make sure that you're slotting time, that you're slotting the required time for this course. For this assignment, to make sure that you get it in before the deadlines themselves. Y'all are pros at Wireframes at this point. A lot of great work happened in project number 1. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you do for project number 2. Again, hopefully the examples were helpful. Hopefully going through some of the things that made those work well and outlining the assignment is helpful for you. So looking forward to seeing what you submit on Thursday evening, and I'll talk to y'all later. All right. Thanks, guys.